Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 8 Part 40 based on novel. So let's start. What is going on? Within the pavilion, the handsome man had a grave expression on his face as he stared at the deathly silent area in the distance before muttering in bewilderment. It was obvious that even he had failed to realize what exactly had happened in that previous exchange. He used some special means and froze Lei Chen for an instant. In that instant, Lindong evaded his attack and gave a palm attack to him before snatching away the hairpin, said Ling Qingshu in a soft voice as she stared at the youthful figure in the distance with her clear eyes. The expression on the man's face changed slightly as he was simply unable to believe that Lindong was able to do so many things in such a short moment. His speed and judgment was truly astonishing. This Dao sect disciple is truly not simple, muttered the man with a grave expression on his face. He knew that if he was in Qian Lei's shoes, he would likely be in an even worse state. Ling Qingshu's slender eyelashes fluttered as she gently blinked. Her eyelids covered the sliver of complex emotions that surged out from within her eyes. That scene from before that happened in a flash was sufficient to shock many people. This was especially true for her since she knew about Lindong's background. The shock that she had received was undoubtedly even greater. Who would have thought that the youth from a branch family in such a low-rank empire would actually be able to reach this stage today? Perhaps the strength that Lindong displayed today was not sufficient to cause Ling Qingshu to be terrified. However, his progress was enough to cause emotions to flood her mind. That immature and weak youth had eventually accomplished what he had declared in the past. Ling Qingshu gently bit her lips with her pearly white teeth. After a while, even with her quiet and cold temperament, she was still unable to resist as she softly sighed. It was obvious that her tranquil lake-esque state of mind was now thrown into disarray by the familiar figure that had once again appeared before her. Such a thing rarely occurred to her. Furthermore, it had occurred again because of the same man. Please pay up. As Lindong's mockery-filled voice echoed across the now deathly silent area, an incredulous expression appeared on everyone's faces. In the next moment, gaze after gaze could not help but to focus on Lei Chen. Right now, his expression was fluctuating, while the dark look in his eyes was so rich that it could not be erased. The Little Thunder King, one of the 3 little kings of Yuan Gate, was actually made a fool of in this place. In the previous lightning-quick exchange, even Lei Chen himself could only feel his body freeze for an instant. In the next instance, a palm attack had viciously struck his chest. From start to finish, he had not even made contact with the corner of Lindong's clothes. This was undoubtedly an utter humiliation for Lei Chen. You courting death? The fluctuating expression on Lei Chen's face finally condensed on the sinister side. He roared in a low voice as he stared at Lindong with anger erupting from his eyes. The members of Yuan Gate truly have no morals. They can't even keep the most basic promises, said Lindong with a faint smile. Upon hearing these words, quite a number of the surrounding onlookers nodded their heads. As spectators, they were clearly aware of how the entire matter had played out. The deal was initiated by Lei Chen himself. If he failed to make good on his own promise, he would definitely seem a little despicable. Furthermore, he was a disciple of the strongest sect in Eastern Xian region. Even though no one dared to mock him due to the prestige and might attached to the Yuan Gate's name, their ridiculing gazes caused Lei Chen and the Yuan Gate disciples' expression to turn unnatural. Fine, I admit defeat, brat. You better pray that you don't meet our Yuan Gate after the great sect competition begins. Lei Chen sucked in a deep breath to suppress his raging emotions, before he suddenly said to Lindong in a menacing manner. Lindong gave a faint smile. Upon seeing his appearance, the anger in Lei Chen's heart almost reached a point whereby his head was about to explode. How many Nirvana pills? Lei Chen forcefully turned around, refusing to look at the smile on Lindong's face that would likely drive him insane. With a gloomy expression on his face, he looked towards the boulder where a middle-aged man sat under a light barrier. He was the owner of the stall that was selling the hairpin soul treasure. With great enthusiasm, he had watched the fight between Lindong and Lei Chen from start to the end. It's not expensive. 6 million nirvana pills, said the middle-aged man in grey. When he looked at Lei Chen's gloomy expression, there was not a single trace of fear in his eyes. Instead, he had a grin on his face. Bullshit, when I heard you discussing the price with her previously, it was only 3 million nirvana pill. Jiang Dao instantly exclaimed in rage upon hearing the man's words. The middle-aged man in grey lazily shot a look at Jiang Dao and ignored him. As someone who was able to survive in unique Devil City, he was definitely capable. Although Yuan Gate had a domineering reputation, it did not intimidate people like him. Lei Chen stared darkly at the middle-aged man in grey. However, in the end, he did not explode in anger. With a jerk of his hand, a lighting glow that contained a frightening amount of force appeared and shot viciously towards him. Bang! In response to Lei Chen's attack, the middle-aged man merely smiled. Boundless yuan power rushed forth in his palm, before he sent it colliding against the lighting glow. As the lighting glow scattered, it transformed into a silver Qiankun bag. Oh, many thanks. Sweeping his gaze across the Qiankun bag in his hand, the middle-aged man gave a faint smile before speaking. Lei Chen's eyes focused a little as he shot a look at the middle-aged man. Without the slightest intention of saying any other unnecessary words, he turned his body and coldly shot a look at Lindong. I hope that your Dao sect will not be as useless as the previous time, if not. Go? As Lei Chen's gloomy voice sounded out, he promptly waved his hand and led the gloomy Yuan Gate disciples and pushed their way out of the crowd. Rapidly disappearing into the distance, they looked as if they were fleeing with their tails tucked between their legs. Mighty senior brother Lindong. After the Yuan Gate disciples left, celebratory noises immediately erupted amongst the Dao sect disciples. Quite a number of them were extremely excited. After all, numerous small-scale and large-scale clashes had occurred between Yuan Gate and Dao sect over the years. However, they rarely managed to gain the upper hand. Hence, after Lindong thwarted Lei Chen this time, they all felt joyous and excited. Lindong smiled. Promptly, he turned around and tossed the jade hairpin in his hand to Ying Huan and said, "Here, treat this as a gift from me." Ying Huan carefully received the hairpin as her face turned slightly red. Raising her head, she sent a sweet smile towards Lindong. Her lovable appearance was unexpectedly different from the little sprite she usually was. "Such formidable means, you have hidden yourself very deeply," said Wang Yang as he walked over. His voice contained amazement and a rarely seen excitement. Lindong smiled while shaking his head. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly turned his head and slightly raised his line of sight as if he had sensed something. As he looked at the top floor of a distant pavilion, he saw a quiet, cold and aloof figure dressed in white clothes appear within his sights. At that moment, the smile on his face slowly started to stiffen. Though they were a distance away, two pairs of eyes met in midair. Instantly, both their bodies froze, while a complicated expression surged in their hearts. Lindong's movements was obviously discovered by Ying Xiaoxiao and the rest. As they followed his gaze into the distance and spotted the quiet and cold figure, the expressions on their faces slightly changed. "That's Ling Qingzhu from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. As expected, she is the leader for the Great Sect competition this time," said Wang Yang in a soft voice. As he stared at that beautiful figure, a fluctuation appeared even in a heart like his that was already somewhat numbed. "That lady is truly bewitching. She has completely bewitched countless genius from various super sects in Eastern Xian region. However, up till now, no one has managed to move her heart." Wang Yang smacked his lips before suddenly realizing that there was something amiss about the surrounding atmosphere. In the next moment, he seemingly felt an uproar spreading out from around him. Raising his head, he saw that the beautiful figure in a white snow-like dress had unexpectedly floated over from the pavilion. Under the attention of the crowd, she gradually descended in front of Lindong. The cheering noises from the Dao sect disciples spontaneously came to a halt, as all of them stared in amazement at the most famous female younger generation member in Eastern Xian region. Under the crowd's attention, she finally landed in front of Lindong. Without saying anything, she quietly stared at Lindong with her clear and cold eyes. This scene caused the surrounding atmosphere to turn exceedingly strange. Under that strange atmosphere, Lindong suddenly took a deep breath and smiled. In the next moment, he extended a hand towards Ling Qingzhu as a complicated laughter rang out. "Nice to meet you. I'm Lindong from the Great Yang Empire." Lindong's laughter had a somewhat complicated flavor to it as it echoed across the somewhat quiet treasure-seeking district. Soon after, quite a number of people looked towards the hand he had extended towards Ling Qingzhu, and were all momentarily stunned. Did this fellow not know just who was standing before him? She was one of the most dazzling member of the younger generation in Eastern Xian region. Countless young geniuses from various super sects had tried everything in their power just to make this beauty smile. However, not a single person could get close to her to this day. Yet, this fellow actually extended his hand in such a manner. Who did he think he was? Of course, they were not the only ones who felt so. Even Wang Yang, Ying Xiaoxiao and the rest were stunned by Lindong's actions. If she ignored him in front of such a huge crowd, wouldn't he end up making a fool of himself? However, Lindong completely ignored the various strange gazes from around him. His eyes merely contained a trace of complicated feelings as he quietly stared at this beautiful lady, who seemed to have become even colder and prettier as compared to 5 years ago. The scene from back then once again surged out from deep within his mind. It was as though it had occurred yesterday. Ling Qingzhu's clear eyes were also staring at Lindong. His young face no longer possessed the same childish glow from back then. Moreover, when he looked at her, his bright eyes no longer avoided her own. This was because the current him had the qualifications to ignore the dazzling halo around her. It was an exchange of gazes of equals. Ling Qingzhu's eyelashes gently blinked. She was aware of just how much effort this young man before her had put in over the past 5 years in order to reach this stage. 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace, Ling Qingzhu. Her quiet lake-like eyes finally rippled slightly at this moment. After which, Ling Qingzhu extended her delicate hand in front of those numerous stunned eyes and gently shook Lindong's hand. The touch between the two of them was as cool as jade, while an ease flowed under that calm surface. The touch of their hands was as icy smooth as jade, while a coldness appeared to seep into their bones. At this moment, the sunlight was scattering down from high above in the sky, appearing just like a light pillar that wrapped around the two. This scene was somewhat dazzling. However, their gentle handshake merely lasted for a moment, before both parties simultaneously withdrew their hands. Lindong could sense the surrounding gazes instantly turn searing hot after he withdrew his hand. It appeared as though they wanted to pierce thousands of holes into his body. Congratulations. You have accomplished what you promised back then. Ling Qingzhu withdrew her hand into her sleeve. Her hand was curled slightly and appeared slightly moist. After which, she looked at the young man before her and softly said, "I was wrong." Lindong's mouth parted into a smile. To make a prideful lady like her utter such words, the sense of achievement that he felt was even more pleasant than having forced Lei Chen to withdraw miserably earlier. "Don't worry, I do not dare to say that statement yet," Lindong smilingly said. He could vaguely sense a powerful ripple from within Ling Qingzhu's body. That fluctuation was even stronger than Lei Chen's. Clearly, there was still a gap between the current him and her despite his best efforts. "If you say it, it is likely that you will not be able to participate in the Great Sect competition," Ling Qingzhu replied in an indifferent manner. However, the fluctuation that flashed across her clear eyes quietly revealed that she was indeed a little affected by his words. The onlookers were all baffled by their conversation. However, the two of them understood it very well. Both of them clearly knew that if Lindong was to utter those words now, it would end up causing a frightening commotion. Lindong would also likely become a thorn in the eyes of many young geniuses from various super sects. This was obviously neither the time nor the place to display his youthful arrogance. Perform well during the Great Sect competition. It is not easy to deal with Yuan Gate. Ling Qingzhu was clearly not accustomed to speaking for so long with a man in front of such a large crowd. Hence, she merely softly spoke those words before turning around to leave. "I will find an opportunity to utter those words," Lindong suddenly said as he watched Ling Qingzhu turn around. "You should say it after you are certain that you can keep your life after saying them." Ling Qingzhu's body paused. After which, her toes pressed gently on the ground. She immediately turned into a ray of light that quickly rushed off into the distance. After Ling Qingzhu's departure, the eyes of this entire district immediately gathered on Lindong. Although the conversation between the two of them was completely baffling, it seemed to imply that this was not the first time that Lindong and Ling Qingzhu had met. Moreover, their conversation indicated that they did not have a simple relationship. There was something fishy between the two of them. Some looked at each other and formed a conclusion that caused them to feel extreme displeasure in their hearts. He is actually acquainted with Ling Qingzhu, Wang Yang muttered in shock. Ying Xiaoxiao nodded slightly. She glanced at Lindong's back in a peculiar manner. After which, she turned her head and looked at the young lady beside her, who had suddenly turned mute. "Are you all right?" Ying Xiaoxiao softly sighed within her heart. It was likely that quite a number of young ladies would feel deflated in front of Ling Qingzhu, who was outstanding in every aspect. The young lady gently shook her head in front of Ying Xiaoxiao's eyes. Soon after, she lifted her lips. She raised her head, her large eyes staring at the spot where Ling Qingzhu had disappeared. After which, she turned her head and softly said to Ying Xiaoxiao, "I will become even more outstanding than her." Ying Xiaoxiao was momentarily startled. When she looked at that young lady's bright and beautiful face, she seemed to see an icy blue hue rising in the latter's eyes bit by bit. Ying Xiaoxiao was somewhat taken aback. It truly seemed as if the young lady before her would undergo a complete metamorphosis one day. At that time, it was likely that she would become even more dazzling than Ling Qingzhu. "Big sis believes in you." Ying Xiaoxiao did not know where this emotion sprouted from. However, she was clearly quite pleased when she saw that Ying Huanhuan did not feel dejected because of Ling Qingzhu's appearance. Immediately, she rubbed the young lady's head and softly laughed. Ying Huanhuan laughed sweetly, while the icy blue hue within her eyes quietly disappeared. However, it was likely that even she herself might not have sensed that in the depths of her pupils, jet black had slowly started to merge with that icy blue. Due to Ling Qingzhu's appearance, this young lady, who typically went with the flow, seemed to have awoken the pride deep within her bones, and this caused certain changes within her to accelerate. At this moment, Lindong had also withdrawn his gaze. He immediately inhaled a deep breath of air. The meeting 5 years later was not as explosive as he had imagined. The two of them had calmly looked at each other and conversed in a calm manner. After which, they had parted in a similarly calm manner. However, this was good. Lindong smiled. Although the current him was completely different compared to 5 years ago, he was still not very stunning in the eyes of Ling Qingzhu, whose eyes were already used to seeing countless geniuses. The reason the latter had displayed such emotion was likely because of how vastly different Lindong's status and power was now compared to 5 years ago. Although the unexpected occurrence back then forced the two of them into an absurd situation that caught them both off guard, Lindong was not foolish enough to believe that a lady like Ling Qingzhu would swear her undying love to him because of such an incident. A proud phoenix like her would never be retained by even the most gorgeous sycamore tree. Lindong turned around and saw those strange gazes that Wang Yang's group were directing at him. He involuntarily coughed dryly and spread out his hands. "You know her?" Wang Yang involuntarily asked. He felt like he was speaking too much today. It was as though he had completely changed from his usual quiet and lonely self. However, he had no choice. The feats that Lindong had accomplished today caused him to involuntarily speak a little more. "We met once 5 years ago in Great Yang Empire." Lindong gently nodded and said. Wang Yang, Ying Xiaoxiao and the others exchanged glances. They clearly did not expect that the two of them had met 5 years ago. However, there should have been a huge difference in status between the two of them back then. Yet, they had still met. The group wondered just what happened between the both of them. From the looks it was obvious that it was no ordinary meeting. "Let's go. We should also head back." Lindong did not dwell on this topic. He immediately waved his hand and was just about to leave when his eyes drifted towards the stone within the light barrier where the grey-clothed middle-aged man was at earlier. At this moment, there were over a dozen light clusters on the stone. A powerful fluctuation was being emitted from those light clusters. Clearly, they were powerful soul treasures. However, Lindong's eyes did not linger for long on those light clusters. Instead, his eyes shifted and finally landed in a corner. There was a somewhat dimmer light cluster at that spot. The light cluster contained a palm-sized dark red damaged copper cauldron. The stone talisman within his body seemed to ripple when Lindong's eyes landed on the dark red damaged copper cauldron. That fluctuation was extremely slight, but it was still detected by Lindong. Immediately, his eyes focused in an unnoticeable fashion. In the next moment, after a slight hesitation, he lifted his foot and walked forward. He did not hide his intention as he held the copper cauldron in his hand. Immediately, he lifted his head and smiled towards that grey-clothed middle-aged man. "What is the price of this object?" The middle-aged man atop the stone was obviously startled by Lindong's question. Shortly after, his line of sight fluttered to the dull red damaged copper cauldron in Lindong's hands before he asked with a faint smile, "Oh? Why are you interested in it?" "I gained an interest while browsing." Lindong chuckled. He naturally knew everyone here was extremely experienced. Although they did not know exactly what every item fished out from unique devil region did, they were very vigilant. After all, there were cases where items which looked broken actually turned out to be invaluable treasures. Hearing Lindong's reply, the middle-aged man narrowed his eyes a little before sending his penetrating gaze towards the dull red damaged cauldron. Only after quite a long while did he slowly retract his gaze. He had already done a lot of research, and only after he failed to uncover anything unique about them, did he choose to hawk these items. This was especially the case for the bronze cauldron as there was not a single bit of fluctuation within. Therefore, it was definitely not a pure Yuan treasure which had its brilliance concealed. "Do you know what it is?" As the middle-aged man was wrinkling his forehead, Lindong waved the bronze cauldron in his hand, before asking him this question. "If I knew, perhaps I wouldn't even sell it," said the middle-aged man with a smile. "How much is it?" asked Lindong once again in a soft voice. The middle-aged man hesitated for a while. Promptly, his eyes faintly sparkled before he replied, 10 million nirvana pills. After he spoke, an uproar emerged among the Tao sect disciples behind Lindong, as they stared at the middle-aged man in anger. This fellow did not even know anything about this item, yet he actually dared to quote such an outrageous price. "Sir, aren't you a little too greedy?" asked Lindong while he faintly wrinkled his brows. "The prices of the items that we sell here, especially those of unknown origin, are quite high. That is because we have to shoulder the burden if a seemingly useless item turns out to be an invaluable treasure." The middle-aged man shrugged his shoulders and replied, "You have to consider my point of view as well. If this item truly turns out to be a gem, how much blood will I vomit then?" "As if there are so many invaluable dirt-covered treasures covered in this world," said Lindong casually. He did not wish to say anything more. After hesitating for a moment, he took out a Qianquan bag. However, after he took out his Qianquan bag, his hand stiffened as he suddenly recalled something. All his nirvana pills were used by little Martin to deploy the Great Array. Although Ying Huan had also volunteered her nirvana pills, little Martin only took enough pills from her to supplement the quantity that Lindong lacked. Therefore, the current Lindong was basically broke. Just as Lindong's body stiffened and he started to feel awkward, a jade-like hand gave a soft wave, throwing a Qianquan bag at the middle-aged man dressed in grey atop of the stone. Receiving the Qianquan bag, the middle-aged man gave it a glance before looking at the slender and elegant young lady standing behind Lindong. Following that, he sent a smile towards Lindong and said, "You have good luck with women, young man." Lindong tilted his head and looked towards Ying Huan as he smiled. "Thanks. Proper behavior is based on reciprocity," replied Ying Huan casually. Her big eyes shot a glance at Lindong before retracting. From the looks of it, the young lady seemed a little upset. Lindong gawked faintly before replying with a single, "Oh." Standing up, he conveniently kept the dull red damaged bronze cauldron into his Qianquan bag, before smiling at Ying Xiaoxiao and the rest, "We should leave too." After saying that, he took the lead by turning around to walk away. At his back, the Tao sect disciples also flocked and followed behind. Ying Huan looked at Lindong's back before her pearly teeth bit her lips. A sliver of complaint seemingly flashed past her eyes, however, it was at this moment that she was dragged along by Ying Xiao. When Lindong and the rest returned to their inn, they saw Lei Chen, and the other two hall masters standing there with stern expressions on their faces. Behind them were quite a number of Dao sect disciples. Upon realizing that Lindong and the rest had returned, all of them clearly heaved a sigh of relief. "Did you guys clash with members from Yuan Gate?" asked Lei in a low voice with a frown as he stared at Lindong, Ying Xiao and the rest. Lindong helplessly nodded his head and was just about to speak when Lei opened his mouth again. "I heard that you managed to force Lei Chen to back off." Lindong gawked. This piece of news has traveled really fast. Slightly hesitating, he nodded his head again and said, "I used a little trick." "Ha ha, just like I told you. How can this brat be that easy to deal with? He has a belly filled with tricks and even Lei Chen would not be able to easily deal with him." Right after Lindong replied, Chen could not resist and started to laugh. His laughter contained an unconcealable satisfaction. Lindong and the rest stared in astonishment at the four headmasters who had suddenly started chuckling. Looking at their appearance, it truly seemed like they were not here to lecture them. "Well done. Although you have to consider the big picture sometimes, those despicable scoundrels do need to be taught a lesson," said Lei with a smile as he rubbed his chin. In response to this scene, the only thing Lindong could do was to dryly laugh twice. The great sect competition has yet to begin, yet you guys have already clashed with Yuan Gate. If you think about it, when you guys meet again in Unique Devil region, there will definitely be quite a few clashes. At that time, all of you will have to be careful, said Chen as his face started to turn serious after laughing. Yes. Lindong, Ying Xiao and the rest all nodded their heads. They knew that there was a deep grudge between them and Yuan Gate. In addition to today's incident, the number of conflicts that would arise when they met in the future would definitely increase. Okay, you should all go and have a rest now. The Great Sect competition will start in 2 days. During these 2 days, you all should restrain yourselves and not cause any further problems. Unique Devil City is a chaotic place filled with all sorts of individuals. Don't cause any unnecessary trouble, said Lei with a smile as he waved his hands. Yes. Upon hearing his words, all of the disciples nodded their heads before scattering. This brat is truly full of surprises. Lei Chen's body has likely begun to produce life chi already. However, he was still forced to back off by Lindong. Looking at the direction which Lindong and the rest had scattered, Lei could not help but mumble his thoughts. This little fellow has quite a few tricks up his sleeves. It is not so easy to deal with him, said Chen with a smile. However, we cannot be complacent. Lei Chen is the weakest amongst the 3 little kings of Yuan Gate. The Little Yuan King and Little Spirit King are the more problematic ones. Before the Great Sect competition begins, we should warn Lindong and the rest to be more careful, said Lei while shaking his head. Upon hearing his words, the smiles on the faces of Chen and the other 2 hall masters turned slightly restrained before sighing softly. The 3 little kings of Yuan Gate were indeed formidable opponents. They did not know whether Lindong and the rest would be able to handle them if they were to encounter them in Unique Devil region. They could only hope that they would not suffer the same disastrous loss as they did in the previous Great Sect competition. Night fell and gradually enveloped the enormous Unique Devil City. Meanwhile, the clamor during the day gradually started to die down under the cooling night breeze. In another corner of the city was an expansive courtyard with quite a few individuals shuttling back and forth. This was the lodging area for Yuan Gate in Unique Devil City. Currently, there were 3 figures within a quiet courtyard located deep in the large compound. One of them was the Little Thunder King, Lei Chen, that had crossed blows with Lindong previously. In front of Lei Chen, a handsome man dressed in white robes reclined on a patch of grass with a leaf hanging out of his mouth. With his hands placed behind his head, he lazily watched the night sky. After a long while, his gaze fluttered before he shot a glance at Lei Chen and said, I heard that you were forced to run with your tail between your legs by a new Dao sect disciple in the treasure-seeking district. I was merely careless and was hit by that brat. In a real fight, I'll crush all of the bones in that brat's body within 10 moves. Lei Chen frowned before he coldly chuckled. Heck, you are the only one capable of losing a sure bet, am I right, boss? Said the man in white with a grin on his face before tilting his head to look behind. There was a man dressed in green sitting quiet with his legs crossed. If one was to talk about appearances, he would definitely not be as elegant as the man in white. However, he was well worth a second look. His pair of eyes were prominently long and narrow, giving him a very favorable look. At this time, his head was bent downwards as he slowly wiped the iron sword in his hand. It was as if he did not have any interest in the dispute between Lei Chen and the man in white. If you feel that you have been disrespected, go and take back your face by yourself during the great sect competition. You will meet him there eventually, said the man in green while focusing on the iron sword in his hand, before giving a faint smile. His smile looked like the edge of a sword. The debt will naturally be claimed, said Lei Chen with gloom filling his eyes. He suddenly said, in addition, that brat called Lindong seemed to have met up with Ling Qingzhu today. From the looks of it, they seemed to be quite close. Right after he said those words, a smile that was not a smile appeared on the man dressed in white, before he tilted his head and looked towards the man dressed in green who was wiping his iron sword. The speed at which he wiped the iron sword subtly slowed down, before he faintly wrinkled his eyebrows. In the next moment, he raised his head and looked at Lei Chen. As if he was talking to himself, he muttered, "Does he want to die?" After his soft voice rang out, a gale suddenly swept across the courtyard. Instantly, the ground was sliced to pieces by dozens of deep slashes which depths cannot be measured. When they saw this scene, Lei Chen and the man dressed in white looked at each other, before they shrugged their shoulders. It seems like the Dao sect will suffer a bloodbath during the upcoming Great Sect competition. This video will end here.